Oh, good morning, friends. Merry Christmas. My name is Mrs. Claus, NYC. Welcome to my virtual tour of Santa in Manhattan. I am the best person you can possibly think of to give this tour, except for my friend Jared Goldstein. But I'm going to do some different bragging because I am the founding president of the New York City Santas, which started this year. And I am also a brand new tour guide as of August, just in time for the second wave of the pandemic, when there are no tourists whatsoever in the city of New York City. And I also am a graduate of the Charles W. Howard Santa Claus School in Midland, Michigan, and that was started by a Macy's Parade Santa. So how does a virtual tour work? Well, we're just kind of figuring all this out in virtual world during COVID-19. It's going to be a PowerPoint. And those of you who've just entered, welcome. We are going over the results of our holiday poll, and I'll read you the results here. So let's see. Oh, hold on. I need to release the poll so you can see. I'm going to end the polling and I'm going to share your results. So number one, where was the very first city-sponsored public tree lighting in the United States? It's multiple choice. We've got Rockefeller Center, Bryant Park, Times Square, Madison Square Park. So I'm hoping that Jared was one of the 2 of 4 people who got this correct. It would have been in Madison Square Park.
Okay.
Did you get that right, Pearson?
Got it right.
And now, and you know what?
Yes, but his mom put something else in and wrecked it.
So Pearson, was your first answer the right one? Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to go and get another PhD or another doctorate, Maitreya. All right, so and that was named after James Madison, that park. It was the very first city-sponsored tree lighting in America. And after that, about 50 cities across the United States adopted that idea of having a public city-sponsored tree lighting. Now, let's see here. How many people live in New York City? We've got 7.2 million, 8.4 million, 6 million, and 15,000. So let's see. Three out of 4 of you guessed 8.4 million, and that's the correct answer. So well done, everyone. Well done. 7 million is pretty close. There's a famous song, New York, New York, it's a hell of a town, the Bronx is up. Anyway, they say 7 million are screaming for space. So if you are a song person, totally understandable, but it is now 8.4, and who knows what it is right now. Oh. And then number 3, I spy with my little eye a huge Christmas tree over a sunken ice rink. Where am I? And let's see, 50% of you said Rockefeller Center, and 50% of you said Bryant Park. So the correct answer is Rockefeller. There is an ice rink at Bryant Park. That was a trick question. Haha. And number 4, where does Buddy the Elf get into a snowball fight? Multiple choice. We've got Central Park, Times Square, Midtown, Macy's. So the correct answer is Central Park. And if we have time today, I can show you a video, or I can show you the screen share. Oh my gosh, there's another one. There's another coffee. Okay, so I can show you where Buddy the Elf in Central Park got into that fight. So number 5, when did Christmas become a national holiday? Multiple choice. We've got 1778, 1912, 1870, 1950. The correct answer is 1870, when Ulysses S. Grant made it a national holiday. And my Aunt Judy this is my Aunt Judy who's coming in. So we have a poll to keep everyone busy. Now, number 6, can Santa contract the coronavirus? And I'm so glad I have a medical person here. What do you all think? So number 1 out of 4 people said yes. 1 out of 4 people said no. And 2 out of 4 people said, let's discuss. What do we all think? We can share.
Fauci said that Santa's okay.
Right.
Right.
Right. And Renee, you're in the healthcare profession as well too. Are you on that? Are you agreeing with Jared?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And now here's what my Santa friends have said. So, Maitreya recommends contactless delivery. Yes. What a great idea. I have Santa friends, and I'm surprised that none of my Santa friends are here today. They might show up. Santas are always free to come to my tours. I usually have several beards in my group, several of my husbands, and they will tell you that yes, you can get the coronavirus, and they are scared to death of getting it. So you know what? We're all correct on this. This is a wonderful way to start the tour. All right, so I'm about to share my screen. This tour is going to be about a 45-minute commitment from here. I am not at all offended if you have to go, but if you go, you're going to miss our photo at the end. So it's up to you, people. All right, here we go with the screen share. And you get to see Mrs. Claus's other tabs that are up. So this was me a few years ago in front of Saks Fifth Avenue in better days when we could go out. And that's how I got my start. When I was learning how to be when I was a young Mrs. Claus, I went out and about and just learned how to be Mrs. Claus, and I practiced by talking to New Yorkers, and New Yorkers are just so wonderful about Mrs. Claus. Some of the scariest people, and I don't mean that, but some people who I might not talk to normally will come right up to Mrs. Claus and talk to her. And I like I'm not doing it right now, but I love taking the subway, and I love talking to New Yorkers on the subway. This outfit was designed by a woman named Lisa Ann Maxwell. She's from Medina, Ohio, and I found her on Etsy, and we went back and forth. I wanted something special. And last year I got to wear my dress for the first time as the Wall Street Journal reporter followed me around. And I like this picture. I like these people in the subway looking at me. I think it just shows what New Yorkers pretend that they don't notice, but they do. And my very second paid gig was I couldn't believe it, and I was not very good, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I got to entertain the Clinton family, and I got to get on the floor with Chelsea and Chelsea's kids. It was just a wonderful experience. This was in Katona, New York. And here we go. Show you some other things. So I'd like to tell you about the Charles W. Howard Santa Claus School. It is in Midland, Michigan. But it's had different, I believe it, one of the first incarnations was in New York State. It is the oldest continuously run Santa Claus school in the world. And it is considered to be the Harvard of Christmas education. I got a scholarship from the International Brotherhood of Real Bearded Santas in 2018 to go to this school, and I had such a good time. There's about 300 Santas, and there are more and more Mrs. Clauses all the time. I think there were about 60 Mrs. Clauses when I was there. Now here's Charles W. Howard. And again, I said that he was a Macy's Parade Santa from 1948 to 1965. So as a Macy's Parade Santa, he was one of the most recognized Santas in the United States, if not the world. And he noticed that not all Santas were of the same caliber. Some of them look kind of shabby. And so he developed a school to develop excellence in Santa. So that's him teaching his classes. Now here's me. There were about 300 Santas, and Santa is a gender neutral term. It means everybody who identifies as a Claus. And we learned how to make toys in the toy shop. And we also got to ride the parade sleigh, which has reindeer on it that move. They're not real reindeer, but they move. We each got a chance to pretend to fly over the midnight sky. And here is the proprietor of the Santa Claus School. This is Tom Vallant. He runs the school with his wife, Holly, and that is really her name. It was too much fun. And here up at the top middle is the formation of the Santa Club. It started around January. We had our first meeting early January, and some of these are prominent Santas here in the city. And we all got together for coffee. Some of them were still working. A few of them are Macy's, a few of them are Radio City Santas. Now, you'll notice that this gentleman here does not have a beard. He is called a designer beard Santa, and he's a clown. And you'll notice that these other guys do have beards, and they're known as real bearded Santas. Just to kind of give you some of the lingo. Now, we became an official club through the International Brotherhood of Real Bearded Santas in February, again, just in time for the pandemic. And I decided in the top right, I wanted to make a big splash by showing that I was a woman leading this club. And I paid for this tintype at the Penumbra Foundation. I thought it was really fun. And it was on March 13th, which was February the 13th. And we were this photography studio's very last clients for months and months. And all around us, the city was shutting down. We are touching in this photo. It was the last time I touched anyone for months and months. And these two guys, Gary, who's the vice president, and George, who is the secretary, have become my husbands and my friends. I share them with their wives. And in April, my friend Lonnie over here, who is a Macy's Santa, he and I have an outdoor social distance gig together tonight. We are kind of married, and we decided that for the healthcare clap, we were going to go out, and for a week we went out in April, and it was Christmas every day, and we yelled at kids and clapped with kids in their windows. And here's we've had about an educational Zoom call almost every month, once or twice a month since the pandemic began. And here's one of our talks about virtual backgrounds. We've got some pretty famous Santas in this group, including a Hollywood Santa who you might recognize from this guy here, from a Coca-Cola commercial. All right, so that's a little bit of me. Now I'd like to hear a little bit about you as we think about you, and at the end we'll talk about what we think traditions are, because I have two theories, and I know Jared is on board with one of my theories. One of my theories is that Santa was born in New York City. My second theory is that traditions are born out of disruptions, chaos. And I believe that what we're experiencing now in a global pandemic of us not being able to see each other for months and months at a time is really the start of new traditions and ways of coming together. I think there's going to be some new traditions. I'd like for you to think about that. Tradition comes from the Latin word tradire, which means to transmit for safekeeping. So our Santa timeline goes from 1625, that is the founding of New Amsterdam, to 2020. So a very quick background. 1624, the Dutch West India Company founded the colony of New Netherlands. Now that encompassed parts of Long Island, New York, the state of New York, what would become the state of New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and Connecticut. Lower Manhattan was established in 1625 and was known as New Amsterdam. Now, New York, Manhattan, and the colony of New Netherlands was really always about profit. The early settlers of this colony were trying to get involved in the profitable beaver trade. So it was always about profit. So just keep that in mind. And the founders, the Dutch West India Company loved Saint Nicholas. Now he was a Catholic saint, and the Dutch practiced the Dutch reform. Mrs. Claus suddenly forgot that, and I'll come back to that. But they believed in Saint Nicholas. They thought he was wonderful, and he became the patron saint of New Amsterdam and New Netherlands, and also the patron saint of the New York Historical Society, which we will be bringing up later. So last Saturday was St. Nicholas Day. Now, the real St. Nicholas was an actual Greek saint, 4th century Greek saint, and he was an early bishop of the Christian church. He died when he was 73, which is why depictions of Santa, which are different incarnations of St. Nicholas, depict him as having white hair. He died on December 6th, which is known as St. Nicholas Day. On December 5th, Dutch children will put their shoes out for St. Nicholas to come by and leave goodies in the shoes. Now, St. Nicholas is a perfect saint for the early colony because St. Nicholas was the patron saint of sailors, merchants, unmarried people, students, let's see who else, pawnbrokers, brewers, prostitutes, I mean, you name it, it's pretty much Times Square in a nutshell. He's the perfect guy. So when, I can, some of my Claus friends believe he's a religious character, and some of my Claus friends believe that he's strictly a secular character. I think he's a full-bodied character that embodies all of those things. And I like that. I like that a lot. Now, Sint means saint. Claus can be short for Niklas. So Sint Niklas, Sinterklaas. So can you see where that sounds a lot like Santa Claus, right? Sounds a lot like him. And that upper picture here is a celebration of Sinterklaas, a Sinterklaas celebration in Rhinebeck, New York. You're going to see that Santa developed out of New York City, and also he was really nurtured by the folklore of the Hudson Valley. So Rhinebeck is in the Hudson Valley, and they still practice this today, just not in 2020. It's too risky. So the founder of the New York Historical Society, his name was John Pintard. And the patron saint of the New York Historical Society was Saint Nicholas. And the idea was that Christmas celebrations were becoming very rowdy, drunken and rowdy. And it was his idea to sort of rein that in and become a more, just a more or less chaotic holiday. So here is his woodcut of Saint Nicholas, and you can see how dour he is. He almost looks like Santa, but he doesn't look like very much fun. We also have a good little girl and a bad little boy. Okay, so we're seeing early versions of Santa. This is Santa before his facelift. So everyone, okay, now here's the moment that is my favorite part. Are you all ready to get into the sleigh? Okay, now, Jared, you are a New Yorker. Do you ever get into the sleigh of a stranger? Is that ever a good idea? Let's try that again. Are you ready to get into Mrs. Claus's sleigh? You don't know me very well. Are you ready? Yeah, okay. You know what? I think it's okay to get in my sleigh. So here we go. Let's get in the sleigh. Here we go. Woo! Woo! It's the New York City transit system. It has the most stations of any subway system in the world. And you'll notice that these are true New Yorkers looking at their cell phones, not at each other, and they are pretty much socially distancing. We are going to take this tour in chronological order, which means we get to skip around the island of Manhattan, which is something we couldn't do if we were on foot. Let's call this the silver lining of the pandemic. We are going to start up in Inwood and Dyckman. Now you'll notice that Dyckman Street has a very Dutch sounding name. Little hint, Mrs. Claus may or may not live up in this area. Mrs. Claus may not have some loyalties to this area. Woo! Okay, so we're in the top part of the island. And if you were to go into Washington Heights is a little lower than Inwood. And in Washington Heights, off of the A line on the A train, and that's the real A train that you hear of in the jazz song. You can take the A train. You can go to the Cloisters, and it is owned by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It contains one of the world, at least in the United States, one of the United States' largest collections of medieval and Byzantine art. I chose this because over here in their garden is a pear tree, as in partridge in a pear tree. I thought you might want to look and see what it actually looks like. Here's the medieval gardens. So think of this now, this holiday season. We repeat this 12 times in the song. That's what it looks like. That's what it would have looked like. Now up in Inwood, the very tip of the island, the northern tip, Mrs. Claus loves the north. We have this rock here that memorializes a spot where Peter Minuit, one of the general directors of the of New Amsterdam, purchased Manhattan Island for about 60 guilders, which would be about $24 in today's, depending on inflation. I think it might be a little bit more right now. He purchased it from the Native Americans, Lenapes. So this is the very first shady real estate deal in New York. And if you were to continue up from this and I was just here this morning. Mrs. Claus likes to run in the morning. If you continue up, we have caves. And I thought you'd like to see what the Dutch probably saw at this time. We're so used to seeing New York with skyscrapers, but this is New York schist, which is what allows us to have our skyscrapers be as tall and as stable as they are. These are actual caves up in Inwood. And over here to the right, we've got in the distance, we've got in the same park, we've got the Henry Hudson Bridge. We've got the Hudson River in the distance. You've got the New York or the New Jersey Palisades in the distance. And you've got the start here of the Harlem River. Now, Henry Hudson was the very first European to travel the Hudson Strait. And he did that in 1609, I think it's 1609, with the Dutch East India Company. So if you would continue up from the caves, you would end up here at the Strauss Mansion site. I'm including this in the tour because the Strauss Mansion was owned by Isidore and his wife, Ida, who owned Macy's. They were of German descent. He was from Bavaria and she was from Worms. You're going to see in my tour that Germany becomes very important in our celebration of Christmas. And they moved here in about the 1840s, 1850s, when there was a huge influx of Irish and German immigrants. And I think this might be maybe a well. And up here we have the Dykeman Farmhouse. I just clipped a little bit of their website. I got to go in the Dykeman Farmhouse. I got a private tour. It's close to where I live. It is the oldest Dutch farmhouse in Manhattan. And there was another house, and the property used to be about 300 acres. Let me see if I can find where. Okay, and this particular house was built in 1784, and it shows the persistence of Dutch architecture in New York. So first it was the Dutch, and then when the English took over, it became New York, named after the Duke of York. And then it became New Orange. The Dutch took over again. And then the English had it again, and it became New York. And New York, Manhattan, was occupied by the British during much of the Revolution. So the original property of the Dykeman Farmhouse was destroyed. And if you watch Mad Men, you'll note that Peter Campbell likes to brag that he is a Peter Dykeman Campbell. He's showing off. During the pandemic, you can sit here on this back porch and do your homework and your work. It's been lovely. Here's the house, how it used to look. It doesn't look like that anymore. And now we're going to go to the very bottom tip of the island. Okay, and we're going to the bottom tip of the island because Peter Stuyvesant, the last Director General of New Amsterdam, lived here, and his home was on the Bowery. Bowery means farm. And the original spelling was Bouwerij. I love the Dutch. Now he put up a church, a little family chapel on his property, and it was dedicated to St. Nicholas. He admired St. Nicholas. He had a son named Nicholas, and when Peter Stuyvesant died, his bones went into that chapel. And then later on, his relatives gave that, they sold the chapel, the property, the Bowery, to the Episcopal Diocese of New York for $1. And they built a church on that property called St. Mark's in the Bowery. And Peter Stuyvesant's bones went in there. So I believe that this is a real birth of Santa in sort of a indirect way. Peter Stuyvesant was known as Peg Leg Pete. He had his right leg blown off by a cannon in an earlier expedition, and he believed that he was destined for greater things. He was not tolerant of other religions. It was the Dutch Reformed Church that he belonged to, and he is famous for building the Wall of Wall Street, which provided protection. Here is the church today. And the New York Historical Society the St. Nicholas Society, one of the oldest societies in America, has raised funds over the years to help this church out. So there is still very much of a Dutch history and preservation in Manhattan. Now, one of the first people to sort of coax St. Nicholas into the being of Santa Claus was Washington Irving, who was famous for writing, I always forget this part, even though I know it very well, Ichabod Crane and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. He was born in Lower Manhattan, and he was the youngest of 11 children. He wrote this very fun, tongue-in-cheek book. I read it occasionally. There's some jokes in there that I don't understand. I think you would have had to have been a person of his time to understand, but he is frequently saying in this book, by St. Nicholas, by the good St. Nicholas. So he's probably making fun of a saying that people had in New York at that time. And you can see here that he's mentioning in this quote, he's mentioning that Peter Stuyvesant built a chapel to the great and good St. Nicholas, who immediately took the town of New Amsterdam under his peculiar patronage. There we go, peculiar. And here's Washington Irving. He had a home in Irvington. He has a home that is still there. I highly recommend, if you come to New York City, to take about a 40-minute Metro North ride from Grand Central up through into Irvington, Sleepy Hollow area. His home is called Sunnyside. Here's the home. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's just off of the old Croton Aqueduct Trail, which used to it started at Croton, and it would bring fresh water from Croton into New York City. And it was a huge innovation. There was a cholera epidemic in the 1830s. So I'm bringing this up because we're having a pretty big, scary time in disease and public health right now. If you were to take that trail around here, you would go through the properties in the backyards of the Rockefellers, Madam C.J. Walker, who was the very first self-made African-American millionaire in the United States. Jay Gould. It's lovely, and it would take you all the way down to 42nd Street where the library is today. I'm going to skip around a little bit here. We're going to be honoring Dutch heritage. So a really quick timeline. 1804, the New York Historical Society was founded to preserve Dutch culture, including honoring of St. Nicholas. 1809, Washington Irving publishes A History of New York with a funny depiction of St. Nicholas on December 6th, which is St. Nicholas Day. Now, Jared celebrates the bicentennial of Santa in New York based on this date. 1810, New York Historical Society hosts its very first St. Nicholas dinner. 1822, Clement Clark Moore writes a visit from St. Nicholas, inspired by his friends like Washington Irving. 1823, the Troy Sentinel publishes the poem. We'll break that down. Now, one of the first New York City Santa Club meetings that we had, we got to have a free talk with a librarian from the New York Historical Society. It was wonderful. We learned about the desk that possibly belonged and most likely belonged to Clement Clark Moore, that he most likely wrote his famous poem on. Clement Clark Moore was a very serious scholar of the Bible. He was president of Columbia College, and his father was also a bishop. His father was also an Episcopalian clergyman. He gave last rites to Alexander Hamilton. Now that is a really big deal because Alexander Hamilton died in a duel which was illegal. So it was a big deal for Clement Clark Moore's father to give last rites to somebody who did something illegal. And Clement Clark Moore is buried in Trinity Wall Street Cemetery. But Alexander Hamilton's son also died in a duel, and his son was not allowed to be buried within the gates. So just kind of giving you some background here. And his estate, Clement Clark Moore inherited his estate from his mother. It was called Chelsea. If you've ever been to New York, you might know of the neighborhood of Chelsea. More about that later. Oh, I'll show you the last part of this because it's just funny. I like seeing the Santas talking to each other. I mean, it's just, I'll skip around a little. I'll skip around a little bit at the end. I mean, it's just so cute. We did a ho, ho, ho together. Okay, never mind. We'll come back to that. Really fun. Now here's the desk. And the desk came to the New York Historical Society through the family of a woman named Harriet Butler. Harriet Butler never married. Her father was friends with Clement Clark Moore, and her brother was actually named after Clement Clark Moore. So Harriet Butler and her family were friends of the Clement Clark Moores. Now, on Christmas Eve, 1822, Clement Clark Moore read this poem in his estate in Chelsea. And the theory that the library has is that Harriet Butler was present. Harriet Butler's family was from Troy, New York. The theory is that she wrote the poem down. She was enamored with the poem. She wrote it down in her personal copybook. The next year, she is the candidate, they believe, who probably gave it to the Troy Sentinel. So if I were a children's book writer, and I don't think that I have many talents, but that's not one of them, but I would write about Harriet Butler. This desk belonged to her. It was passed down through members of her family. And it's very likely that is really that's a true story. Here is his property. And to the right is a rendering that one of his daughters did of the home. Now, he began selling off lots of his property to prominent New Yorkers. He was wealthy, and he gave his orchard, his apple orchard, to the General Theological Seminary, where it stays today. Clement Clark Moore owned slaves. He actually was against abolition. Abolition in New York City ended in 1827. Here's Clement Clark Moore Park that is down in Chelsea in honor of him. And continuing this idea of St. Nicholas, we're going to go to the Washington Heights area. We're going to go around this area. You can get there in a few different ways. You can take, of course, the all famous A train. You can take the C train. I think you can take the 1 train. We're going to 111th and 193rd Street. So St. Nicholas Avenue goes up, it runs parallel to Broadway. And it was an important road in the 1700s that led from Dutch New Amsterdam to the English New England colonies. It may have Native American roots as a trail. It's an important street. And at 155th Street, there is the Church of the Intercession. Now, Clement Clark Moore is buried here. I have been trying to get into the cemetery during the pandemic, and I keep telling them that I'm related to Clement Clark Moore. No cigar, they won't let me in. One day I will get in there, but there is a wonderful, not this year, but there is a tradition of doing a St. Nicholas a celebration in honor of Clement Clark Moore. They do a church service. They have a prominent person in the community read the poem. They take their candlelights out into the cemetery to honor Clement Clark Moore. Here's the cemetery. It's absolutely huge. Here is the grave of Clement Clark Moore. In the same cemetery, we also have the grave of Alfred Tennyson Dickens. Now, he is the son of Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens stayed in Manhattan or in New York for about a month. And he really was a big proponent of copyright laws, especially international ones. Now, Washington Irving was also really big in this, and Washington Irving led a coalition. And when Charles Dickens came to the United States, he helped Washington Irving. They were really big, and there was a lot of pirating going, and they believed that writing was a legitimate occupation. They were tired of having their works plagiarized. And Dickens is really one of the people, I believe that Washington Irving and Charles Dickens, they were contemporaries. I believe that they began to even share ideas about Christmas. If you think about it, Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol. There's a character in there that's very Father Christmas-like. It starts to become a family holiday. So one more time, here's a quick review of the Dutch ancestry movement. 1809, Washington Irving publishes A History of New York. 1822, Clement Clark Moore pens A Visit from St. Nicholas, also known as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. 1835, Washington Irving is one of the founders of the St. Nicholas Society, one of the oldest societies in America. You have to, at the time, you had to be a man. You had to have been born sometime, I think before, I can't remember what the cutoff date was. It was in the 1700s to show that you were an old school family. You had to be invited, and you had to be a person of good standing. Today, this society still exists. They have a magazine called The Weathercock. I've been trying to get into it. No one has invited me. And what's interesting about that is they're very much into celebrating arts and letters. And again, they donated some money to have the St. Mark's in the Bowery restored. Now here we have this funny depiction that looks a little bit more like Santa. If you remember John Pintard's wood cutout, that looked like a very dour saint. We're starting to see a guy who's more fun. Washington Irving, Clement Clark Moore, this artist Robert Walter Weir were hanging out with each other. They were big supporters of the New York Historical Society. They were in the St. Nicholas Society. He's dressed like a traditional peddler, a Dutch peddler. I love his boots. They're very groovy. I want them. And he's crushing a pipe. That is a Dutch tradition. The librarian at the New York Historical Society didn't know why that was prominent, but they did that on their fireplaces on the eve of St. Nicholas Day. There's a stocking. He's got his finger alongside of his nose. He has a pack. He's about to go up the chimney. We're seeing the birth of Santa. So I mentioned before that in the 1840s and the 1850s, there was a huge influx of Irish and German immigrants. The first Christmas tree market opens in Washington Market. And this is significant because in 1850, Ladies' Goatee Book ran a picture of Queen Victoria from England and her husband, a German man named Prince Albert, standing in front of the Christmas tree with their family. It's a German tradition. So when that picture appeared in Ladies' Goatee Book, and the cost of printing is becoming a lot cheaper and communications are getting faster, people love the idea. And the very next year, the Christmas tree opens in Washington Market. Christmas tree, people start buying Christmas trees. 1863, Thomas Nast, who is from Germany, moves to the Lower East Side when he moves to the Lower East Side. And he's very famous for creating the image of Santa Claus that we know from Harper's Weekly. He's also known as the father of the American political cartoon. He did a lot of pictures of Tammany Hall and Boss Tweed. He also did the elephant representing the GOP party. This wonderful celebration of German-ness in Christmas history starts to become a little bit more iffy during 1918, during World War I. People really began to reject the Christmas idea or the German idea of Christmas. Here are some of these images that Thomas Nast did of Santa Claus. He's becoming so much more fun, and he's got this wonderful girth. He's a lover of animals. You see it in children. He's got that long Dutch pipe. We're starting to see a blending of immigrant ideas and folklore. Here is that picture. It wasn't a photo. I almost said it was a photo. It's not a photo. Now, Queen Victoria had this engraving done in 1848. That was the first time it appeared. In the United States, it appeared in 1850 in Ladies' Goatee Book. People followed her as a fashion icon, similar to how we do with Meghan Markle, Princess Di. We watched, I loved all of Princess Di's outfits. And who else? Sarah, the Middleton sisters. So to see all of this at play, we are going to go to the Merchant's House it's on 4th Street. We're also going to go to Washington Square Park because it's very close. To get a little hot chocolate virtually, we're going to go to Cafe Reggio's because you may be thirsty. We are in the West Village. Here is the merchant's house. This was made in, let's see here, it was made in the 1830s, and Seabury Treadwell, a man named Seabury Treadwell, who was a merchant, moved into the house in 1835. His family stayed in the house until the last child died in 1933. It was like a time capsule. The furnishings were still there. It was New York City's very first landmark. Seabury Treadwell made his fortune as a hardware salesman, and he made his fortune. The Erie Canal had opened up. Here's a picture of the Erie Canal that opened up the Atlantic Ocean, New York City area to the Great Lakes. Communications and travel are speeding up, which contributes to the idea of a more homogeneous Christmas. Now, do you see how tall the stairs were? People came into their carriages. The streets were very muddy. When I went to the merchant's house a few weeks ago, I went through this door. But if you were a prominent person coming to visit, your carriage would pull up to this entrance here, and you would enter into the hallway. Now, the Treadwell family believed in the Dutch tradition of Christmas, so they didn't celebrate it quite as much in the same way that we do today. Instead, they were more into New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. So, and by the way, this house usually has a reading of a Christmas carol every year. It's very hard to get tickets. This year, tickets are free, a suggested donation on their website. I suggest you go. It's a really good actor. It is so hard to get tickets. I signed up for it. I'm just very excited about that. And here's if you were a gentleman, now the gentlemen on New Year's Day would do calling. They would come into their carriages. They would wear their top hats. They would try to hit as many households as possible. The women's job, I'll skip ahead a little bit. The women's job would be to entertain by having punch, spiked, of course, and they would offer the gentlemen music, entertainment, and food. Okay, I'm going to go back. Here is the picture again of the Christmas tree. So Queen Victoria is starting to help make Christmas be a family holiday. When Seabury Treadwell's family, and again, when he first came to New York City in 1798, he was from Long Island. New Yorkers still did most of their celebrating the way the Dutch did on New Year's Day. 1849, Christmas is a New York State holiday. Before that, it was very regional. And it wasn't until 1870 that President Ulysses S. Grant declared it a national holiday. My theory, too, is the Civil War helped build some communications and help make people a little bit more cosmopolitan in all of their ideas, including those of holidays. Okay, now here's the Christmas tree. They didn't always have a Christmas tree in the merchant's house. They eventually did. That would have been a newer tradition. And around 1870, the house, around mid-1800s, the occupants of this house start to celebrate Christmas on Christmas. They believe that this house is haunted. I kind of do too. When I went in, I heard a recording of someone playing the piano on this piano, and I had a very eerie feeling. I included this bedroom photo. It's a very tall, long household with very narrow stairs. The women of the household would be going up and down in hoop skirts. And the Treadwell family, there's no record of whether or not they paid for water rights onto the Croton Aqueduct when that fresh water became available, but they did get their water from another source. They bought their water, and that meant that their Irish servants had to go up and down those stairs several times a day to bring water to the family. Here's a wash tub. I included this photo. This is the woman, Mrs. Treadwell's bedroom. She slept separately from her husband, as was a tradition. And it reminds me very much of the home that I picture in my head of A Visit from St. Nicholas. I in my night shift and I in my cap, and I suddenly can't remember that. You all know what that is. That looks so much like the poem that I have in my head. Here's where the servants lived. There were 4 Irish Catholic girls living here at a time. And the tradition in the area was that Protestants would hire Irish Catholic girls. There were so many of them. The potato famine was going on. There were so many of them coming to America. They would hire Irish Catholic girls, and they were not always nice to their employees. There's no record of how the Treadwells treated the Irish employees. Here's the parlor again. Notice how dark it is. We think of Christmas as being so bright. These are gas lights. It was a sunny day when I went there. It was very dark inside. Okay, so now we are about to go. We're done with our tour of the Merchant's House. We're gonna go through the NYU area. We're gonna go through the West Village and Washington Square Park. We're about to get our hot chocolate here at Cafe Reggio's. If my video or my presentation stops, you'll all be so kind as to tell me. Sometimes my video stops sharing. Oopsie, oopsie doopsie whoopsie, as in that, there we go, here we go. Here's my videos. Now I'm noticing that in the pandemic, New York is becoming very much of itself. There are no tourists right now. It is becoming extremely weird and bohemian, which I love. Now, here is I'll share my screen with you all in just a moment. And So notice this woman lying under the grand piano. Isn't that funny? I guess this is a thing. You can lie underneath this grand piano when the guy plays in Washington Square Park. I thought that was fun. And then we're about to see some other fun pictures. And I think they just really show the character of the city right now. Let's go to some other videos. We have a few now. Okay, I'm going to point some things out to you. On the left-hand side, you're going to see a video of a man selling his short stories. He's hung them up. You're also going to see some furries. These are people who dress up like furry animals. I don't know why. Mrs. Claus doesn't ask why. I just accept. So, and they are selling their furry costumes. They're two sisters you're going to see. And you're going to see some Hare Krishnas. Here's the furries. Yeah, I just think that it's just wild. I think it's so interesting. I'm very excited about the pandemic ending, but there are some parts of New York that I wouldn't want to miss. It's just been very interesting. So now we're going to McDougal Street. We've just gone through the park. You've gotten your initiation into New York Bohemia. We are now going to go to one of the oldest cafes. I think it's the oldest cafe on McDougal Street. It was made in the 1920s. Cafe Reggio has appeared in many films, including Next Stop at Greenwich Village. When you come here, you can see they claim that it's the first cappuccino machine in America. It is still owned by Italians. And you can sit on a 300-year-old chair that was owned by the Medici family. Now here's a video of this. I'd like for you to take a look at this old cafe and notice all the partitions for the pandemic. Pretty cool. All right. And we are going to go now to, here's this. Here's Cafe Reggio. Here is that partition. I think they've done an ingenious job of doing this. This man is sitting on that chair that's about 300 years old. On the opposite wall is a painting that was done by a student of the School of Caravaggio. It's from the 1600s, I believe. It's like 300 some years old. And they just have new and old mixed in. It's a very bohemian kind of a place. I'm a big fan of these really cute little coffee pots. And now, we are now at West 95th Street. We are about to talk about Virginia O'Hanlon. Her father was an assistant coroner. They lived on West 95th Street. And she was 8 years old, and she was really bothered with the fact that her kids or her friends were saying that there was no such thing as Santa Claus. And her father said, why don't you write to the New York Sun? So she did. And here is her letter to the New York Sun. And now one of the editors responded to her. His name was Francis Pharcellus Church. He was an atheist. He was a hardened Civil War correspondent. He thought the whole exercise was silly. But when he printed his response, it has since become the most widely reprinted editorial in the English language. So here was one thing that he had to say in his response to her. Alas, how dreary would the world be if there were no Santa Claus? It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. Nobody sees Santa Claus, but that is no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor men can see. Young Virginia O'Hanlon grew up, and she got her doctorate from Fordham University. Her dissertation was in the importance of play. A friend of mine is he's a Macy's Santa, and it's probably the most famous seat as Santa in the world, but I'm going to tell you a little something. The pay is terrible. I'm just going to tell you that. Little sneak thing that you might not hear other places. I can tell you that. Santa, my friend Santa, was about to see a little girl, and there were all these press people around. And he asked, who is this little girl? This little girl who was about to sit in his lap was a descendant of Virginia O'Hanlon. So really big deal. And her editorial, Believe, really became an inspiration for window displays later on. In 2003, Lord & Taylor's did a window display dedicated to, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. 2015, Macy's did one as well. And I believe and Believe is a slogan of Macy's. And it's been so influential to the development of Santa Claus out of New York. We also have O. Henry, by the way. O. Henry was from Texas. He is a famous writer who he penned The Gift of the Magi. We're starting to see a lot of economic disparity at the turn of the century. And he lived in Gramercy Park area. He wrote over 300 stories about New York. And he wrote The Gift of the Magi in the tavern across the street that you'll see in a moment. This is a story of a woman named Della who had gorgeous hair. She and her husband are very poor. Her husband, Jim, had a watch. She cuts off her hair and sells it in order to buy him a watch fob to display his watch. He sells his watch in order to buy her a hair comb for her beautiful hair. So I think that's a wonderful story of gift giving and irony and just sort of good feelings in the midst of sadness and despair. And 1912, we've got New York is the first city to sponsor public Christmas tree lighting. And we talked about that. That was in Madison Square Park. 1924, Macy's has its first Christmas parade. 1931, Rockefeller Center has a tree. The ceremony moves to Madison Square Park in the 30s, and now there's a new tradition. 1933, the Radio City Music Hall opens for the show. In 1947, we've got Miracle on 34th Street, based on Macy's. We're going to Gramercy Park, Madison Square Park, in Midtown. So around, let's see here, I might take one of the green lines to get where we're going. Here is O. Henry's home on Irvington Street, and across the way is O. Henry's Way. This is Pete's Tavern. This is where he wrote Gift of the Magi. Here's the very first public Christmas tree lighting. This is in Gramercy Park, or this is in Madison Square Park. Okay, we're gonna skip ahead and we're gonna go to Midtown. And really quickly, we're gonna go to the Brill Building. One of the music publishers within the Brill Building, which is on 49th and Broadway, is called St. Nicholas Music, and they own the rights to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Silver and Gold, A Holly Jolly Christmas, and Rocking Around the Christmas Tree. That music company is still in existence, and they've now moved to the Studio 4 building, which is famous for Studio 54. So they moved to that building recently. This is a recent picture of Times Square. I believe I'm in, some of the theaters are temporarily closed. I'm to the west. I think I'm on 9th Avenue, looking toward Times Square. This is what used to be known as Longacre Square. It is now Times Square. And this is where the ball is going to drop on New Year's. Times Square is much changed these days. There's not a lot of people. A few weeks ago, last week, I was just down there with a friend of mine. Everything shut down. We snuck into the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree lighting. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And when all the restaurants closed at 10 o'clock, there was nothing to buy. My friend tried to buy a $5 pretzel in Times Square. While he was deciding whether or not he wanted to spend $5 on a pretzel, someone offered me cocaine and marijuana, which Mrs. Claus, no, I did not take that. But that, you can get your picture taken by a fake Elmo in Times Square. You can still buy drugs and a $5 pretzel, and that's pretty much it. Sorry for the young ears, but I know your mother. I think I was okay to say that. And I also know your grandfather. All right, now 2020, we are back in modern times. New York City Santas is founded. Mrs. Claus is the founding president because Mrs. Claus wants work. Mrs. Claus is tired of being overshadowed by Santa. Santa's image is huge in New York. I may or may not be the only Mrs. Claus who lives here. A lot of Mrs. Clauses are imported in from other places, including the one from the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. She is from Florida, and he's up on top and she's down below. Mrs. Claus, New York City would like to change that tradition. And we also have Santaland was canceled. I think they're trying to bring it back. Santaland is in Macy's. And Radio City was canceled. Some of my Santa Claus friends have been so sad. But that theater holds 6,200 people. They have several shows a day. Can you imagine what a super spreading event that would be? Holy cow. Now, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade was reimagined this year because of the pandemic. It was 1 block instead of 2.5 miles. A New York City mile is about 20 blocks to give you some perspective. I went ice skating one day before the Thanksgiving Day Parade, and I thought, let me walk down to 34th Street. I did, and I got to watch a whole bunch of stuff in front of Macy's that I thought was a rehearsal. What I found out later, it was a secret recording of the parade. It was ingenious. Okay, we're around, where are we? I think we're in the Rockefeller area. Oh, no, we're not. But we're going to talk about Macy's, okay? Now, Macy's wasn't always on 34th Street. Here's a wonderful postcard from the 1890s of when it was on 14th Street. What I'm about to show you is a clip of a singer I saw on a few days before Thanksgiving, and I thought it was a rehearsal. We can usually watch the rehearsals. This was actually a taping. It was so surreal. Here's the singer. Hardly any people watching. Look how dead New York is. No people. Only these guys. Yeah, very few people. There are people here. People were going to work, but it wasn't what you normally see. The tourists are noticeably not here. Here is on the day before Thanksgiving, a friend and I went to see if we could find the balloons. We were doing some reconnaissance. We wanted to see if we could find some stuff. Now here's the windows. They're still around. Notice the social distance dots. Now Macy's was a big innovator of window displays. Plate glass, the plate glass becoming more clear and more innovative made it easier for them to display their merchandise in windows, and Macy's really took advantage of that. Here's some of the floats that they were assembling. They would assemble the floats on one block. They would move the floats across Macy's, and then they would kind of deassemble on the next block. It was pretty innovative. Here's where the celebrities were. Mrs. Claus tried to poke her little nose in here. There were fancy couches in here, hot chocolate, it looked like, and really warm places for the celebrities to go. And I found out that the Rockettes do their rehearsing inside Macy's on Thanksgiving Day to stay warm. They're just in a pair of tights. That's got to be cold. Here's our social distance dots. Here's one for Santa. Now these two twins, here's Believe, that's one of their slogans. Here are two twins. I don't know what I was trying to figure out what the significance is of these two twins holding hands. They are probably some type of nymph. They were hearkening back to Greek mythology to make them look more classical. We're in Bryant Park, 42nd Street. I remember we were talking about the Croton Aqueduct that brought clean water from Croton into New York City as a result of the cholera epidemic of the 1830s. Well, that aqueduct goes underneath the library. This is the New York City Public Library, the same one that was in Ghostbusters. And if you go inside the library, you can't right now, you would see a fantastic Christmas tree. And if you continue on the first floor into I think it's the new media area, you can look down and you can see the aqueduct. And this is Bryant Park, named after William Cullen Bryant. It used to be a cemetery. A lot of New York City parks started off as cemeteries. If you would go east, you would run into Grand Central Station. If you would go west, you would run into Times Square. I included this because it's Claus's favorite place to ice skate, including right now. You can get a social distance time. If you have your own ice skates, you can skate for free. I've never had such a great time skating in New York. I hear that Rockefeller is having special times around midnight that are cheaper, but usually it's one of the most expensive places you could go. Terrible place to put your skates on, wonderful ambiance, about 50 bucks. But Mrs. Claus wants to try to do the midnight skate. They usually have a huge tree in Bryant Park. This year they have 3 trees that I find kind of disappointing. They don't want people gathering. But you and your family can rent an igloo. You can watch the ice skaters in this igloo. You can spend $200 to $500 with your best friends and hang out in there. There's the Bryant Park Cafe, fancy upscale cafe. It's right next to the library. Well, they've created this little area for social distancing. You can look at the ice rink from here. In front of the library, we've got 2 lions, Patience and Fortitude. They're ready for the pandemic. Now, Fiorello LaGuardia was the mayor during the Great Depression, and he named the 2 lions Patience and Fortitude during a time of also big depression, a lot of chaos. We're going up Fifth Avenue. This was taken right before Thanksgiving. New Yorkers were getting ready for Christmas. This is the Diamond District. Here's a tourist stop. Nobody is in there. Here's Saks Fifth Avenue. Here's Tiffany and Company. We're in Rockefeller Center. I like the masks. We've got Radio City Music Hall across the street. And here's Radio City Music Hall with a closed sign and on their gift store. Now, I have tried out for the Rockettes many times. I made it pretty far once. You have to be 5'6", between 5'6" and 5'10 and a half. I'm 5'10". First thing they do is measure you in stocking feet. They're already selling senior tours to older adults. I know that because my day job is with senior citizens. Pretty brilliant. And again, that theater has 6,200 seats. I would like for you to watch. This is my favorite part. It's when Santa arrives in New York. You're going to see some famous landmarks that you've already met. We're coming to the end of my tour. Mrs. Claus likes to talk. You would be wearing 3D glasses.
Merry Christmas! Follow me! Wow, that was fun!
And Santa, everybody's wearing 3D glasses, and that's when the real Santa comes down the aisle, and everybody goes crazy. It is wonderful. It's one of the best Santas ever.
Lots of traffic up here today. Take it down.
All right. Here we go. We're coming towards the end of the tour. Here's them putting up the Rockefeller tree. Notice all the scaffolding. This was last year when the Radio City Santa came and hung out with me. We went out and had coffee. He's very sad right now. He's not working in New York. Here's them preparing for their ice rink. We'll just skip through these quickly. This is the very first tree lighting done during the Great Depression in Rockefeller Center. This was 1931. They were lining up to get their paychecks during the Great Depression. And then the tree lighting moved to Rockefeller officially from Madison Square Park in 1933. This is them putting the tree up today. This is me. I snuck in with a friend of mine. And we kept saying to the police officers, "Oh, officer, we're trying to go to a restaurant in there on 48th Street. And the police officer said, "Okay." And it was a small group of us, and it was breathtaking. We were on 48th Street. There was hardly anyone there. Toward the very end of us waiting, maybe there were 60 people. That is nowhere near what would normally happen. We couldn't get near the ice rink. Here is Rockefeller the owl that was discovered inside the Rockefeller tree after it made its long trip from someone's upstate backyard into New York City in Rockefeller Center, and he has since been released from they put him into an upstate nature preserve, and he's since okay. Here's some more of Rockefeller Center, FAO Schwartz, hardly anybody there. Across the street is the Today Show, hardly anybody there. Here's the very last window display of Lord and Taylor. And I mentioned that Macy's was a big innovator of window displays. Well, Amazon is a big innovator of online shopping. So that is a huge change of the brick and mortar. So we're going to start to see some changes in traditions and a holding on of others. And here's my friend Gary. Gary is he is my vice president and one of my many husbands. We do a lot of spousal swapping in the Claus world. I went to see him with friends last week. It is the only Santa that we know of that is appearing in a department store. It's a brand new store. It opened up last year. Lots of places to social distance. He comes down the escalator. They make it snow down the escalator bank. He's got 2 elves, 1 on each side. Those elves keep everybody away from Santa of at least 6 feet. You can bring your dog into Nordstrom's, by the way. And here we are at the very end. Mrs. Claus just was chatty, chatty, chatty. I would like to open this up and we can talk about traditions. Does anyone have a tradition that they would like to share or one that they think is going to change as a result of the pandemic? Oh, we're so quiet. I'm going to ask Pearson. Pearson, what is going on with you over there? You are a young man of about, how old are you? 12, 13?
Yeah, I'm 13. Yeah. Yeah. I'm 13 and a half now. Yeah. We, one of our traditions, we always go to our grandparents' house on Christmas Eve every year. And we spend the night there and then wake up in the morning there. And so this year we're taking like a week off school, 1 week before Christmas break, so that we can like quarantine before we go over there.
Oh, that's smart. Okay. So that's a huge change, isn't it?
Yeah.
From what you normally do?
Yeah.
Did you know what the word quarantine was before?
Yeah, I did, but like never used it.
Little backstory, Maitreya, Pearson's mother, is a pediatrician in Canada. Oh, Canada. Yeah, so you probably know about quarantining from your mother and about vaccines and shots. Great, now Jared, tell us about your tradition. I think that Christmas and Hanukkah and Christmas in New York really, really influence one another. What do you think? Oh, I'm going to unmute you, my friend. I can't hear you. Oh, there we go.
I'm back. I like to celebrate Hanukkah with my family, and we have potato latkes, which is potato pancakes fried in oil, like the oil of the miraculous lamps in a Jewish tradition, and in a different tradition, I like to visit Santa Claus at Macy's Santaland, but this year Santaland is closed. It can get really crowded there. And Santa, you're allowed to sit on Santa's lap. So I think this year we have to be further apart.
Okay, so you have it. I think it did open. Did it open, Santaland?
Oh, I thought it didn't. I don't. I could look into it more closely. I don't think it's open.
So could I. I know that there was a call out for Santas and they were trying to figure out how to open it, but it was sort of late in the game. It is virtual. You can do some stuff virtual, but I'm just gonna say, everyone, you should be a little wary of what you sit, whose lap you sit on virtually. Just saying. That's just Mrs. Claus's personal opinion. Yeah. Now, Renee, tell us about your traditions.
And sometimes behind the receiver, but his accuracy.
I'm going to unmute you. Can I unmute you there, Renee? Renee and I used to work together in the health center at Lehman College.
Yes. So we're currently in Pennsylvania, New York. So we've been here for about 6 years. So we would generally go to the mall, visit Santa, get into the spirit. And then, come Christmas Eve night, 12 a.m. rather, I'm sorry, then we would all be together and exchange gifts. And it's usually such a beautiful time for myself and my family. However, this year we are unable to visit Santa, and we'll most likely do, gift exchange. I don't know, in a different way. You know what I mean? I'm thinking I'm going to drop gifts off. So, it's a little different this year.
It is. Yeah, it's very different. I'm doing a socially distanced outdoor event tonight. And I have no idea how that's going to work. My friend Lonnie is a Macy's Santa. We briefly got married yesterday, and we are ready for our big debut tonight. And my Aunt Judy is here, and Aunt Judy is one of in my own family. She is the person who we went to every year for Christmas. And I was also joined briefly by my grandmother who is in hospice. She's on lockdown in hospice in Indiana. She is the mother of Christmas in my family. So you all are welcome into this is my parlor. This is my North Pole phone. You have just been involved in some of Mrs. Claus's traditions. And I would like to ask you if you'd like to have a photo with me. Could I have everybody gather with me to get a photo? Now, Aunt Judy, I can't see you. I'm going to ask to see your camera. We want to see your beautiful face, Judy. And on the count of 3, oh, there's my Aunt Judy. Here we go on the count of 3.
Oh, yeah, I didn't dress up.
That's okay, Judy. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. I can hang out a little longer, but you've been with me for a long time. You have things to do. And I really want to tell you how thankful I am that you joined me today. You had so many other things to do and you were here with me. I really respect that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Claus. That was very interesting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. I'm going to come to one of your tours for free, correct?
Yes. Well,
good.
we'll work it out.
We'll work it out. All righty.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
It was very good. Easy to get on this time. Very easy.
Oh, good, Aunt Judy.
Yeah, real good. It was very good.
Thank you.
So did you make those pictures, those paper pictures? And I got one in my living room.
Yeah, I did.
I didn't know if you made the ones you have, though. I didn't know if
I
those
did.
were-
I made those.
those grandmas or not. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got looking at mine right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Hey,
it was
Judy,
good.
I'm going to go, okay?
Yeah, good. It was good.